So I'm leaving Canada in about a week, even less than a week now, and I want to talk about some of the problems Canada has so that people arriving in Canada can kind of know what they're getting themselves into. So here's 6 reasons I'm leaving Canada and 6 things you should be aware of when you're coming to Canada. Number one is the international student program is being misused and taken advantage of, and it's developed into this whole scam. There's a thing called a diploma mill. Now, the diploma mill is, I've never heard of this word until like 3 years ago, and now it's everywhere. There's these small strip malls, like very, very small, I don't know, colleges they're calling themselves, even though they're not colleges at all. They're just, I don't know, someone paying $5,000 a month in rent in a small little strip mall with like 600 feet of square space, and they bring in students from overseas and fraudulently say they're studying some kind of nuanced program like I don't know, like a business administration course or some kind of journalism course, something that they don't actually study for. They just go to that school once a week to show the government that they're studying, and then they try to find work in Canada. That school, that fake school, is just to get them here, and people are taking advantage of it. And with all these students flooding Canada, they are misusing and abusing food banks and other social support services meant for vulnerable Canadian citizens and families. Food banks are to provide usually canned food and cheap food for people that can't or are struggling to afford groceries, as we're in like a grocery crisis right now. Grocery prices are through the roof and Canadians cannot afford it. Number two is the high-skilled immigration that recently changed. Instead of bringing in high-skilled, specific shortage immigrants, we allowed the business lobby to control the narrative with public officials and flood the nation with cheap, exploitable labor. So now we have huge lineups for basic jobs like a grocery store, which should be, for Canadian teenagers, it's their first part-time job, something like that. That's how it was when I was growing up. And now it is insane. Just tons of immigrants waiting in line trying to get a minimum wage job just so they can survive in Canada. So there's a problem here too with fraudulent documents. So immigrants are coming to Canada and they're lying on their resumes to get a better job that they're not qualified for, and they're taking that job from a Canadian usually. Now we've got people who are unqualified to be working these jobs and kind of here, not illegally, but almost illegally. Additionally, we're told that we're bringing people in to build houses. Almost none of the people by hard, cold data work in the field of residential construction. Does that make sense? So we're bringing in immigrants to help build houses because Canada's in a housing crisis, and yet none of them are working in the construction industry. How does that make sense to anyone? So growing up, Canada was still a melting pot of tons of different people from all over the world, but they were highly skilled people. An asset to our country. A lot of the doctors I had growing up were either Chinese or Indian, and they had high status jobs. And then we had like a nurse shortage, and we brought in a lot of Filipino nurses to Canada. These people do not buy into housing bubbles economies, though we have to market Canada to them, and that means fixing Canada. It would be a win-win if our leaders weren't so corrupt and criminally negligent. Number 3 is the temporary foreign worker problem. Both Justin Trudeau and the NDP leader Singh talked against this program for its misuse and abuse, when it actually was used to hurt Canadian workers and their bargaining power and access to positions. Then Justin Trudeau expanded the program when he got into power. Number 4. And I'm getting more stressed out just talking about these ones. 4 is the refugee and asylum program, bringing immigrants into Canada, and a lot of them are claiming asylum when they really shouldn't be.
Canada, like many other countries, has become addicted to temporary foreign workers. Over the next 3 years, it wants to reduce the number of temporary foreign residents from 6.2% of the Canadian population to 5, and lower the number of foreign workers a business can hire, though it will carve out exemptions for the construction, healthcare, and agriculture sectors.
This also encourages employers to prioritize workers that are already here, able and willing to do those roles. As of May 1st, we are asking employers that after they consider and offer the job to Canadian citizens, permanent residents, and refugees, that they also now prioritize recruiting asylum seekers.
Some observers say it could help deal with the shortage of housing and ease the affordability crisis.
Many people are scamming the system and using rehearsed lines and nation shopping. The amount of money and resources we're spending on these people when we have our own vulnerable citizens and families living in tents and lining up for free food is despicable. The people with the mentality to try and scam Canada to get free hotel citizenship should be kept as far away from Canada as possible. I read an article the other day about a man from the Bahamas who ended up moving to Canada, and he was able to claim asylum from the Bahamas. Now, the Bahamas is a nice place. It didn't make sense at all. And so he was staying in a hotel for free, and he was staying in a nice hotel in Niagara Falls, like right next to the falls, for free. And you know who was paying for it? Were the Canadians, our tax dollars. He was using some kind of pre-given script to, tell the government employees what to say, and he took advantage of the system, and we are paying for it. Number 5 is the LIMA, the Labor Market Impact Assessment. Basically a document that an employer in Canada may need to get before hiring a foreign worker. When jobs in Canada come up, like good jobs, it should be Canadians that get them first because we are citizens. And let's say there's no Canadian that can do this job and we need to hire someone from outside the country to do it. This is what this program is for. It's being abused and scammed and taken advantage of. We have employers pretending to advertise jobs in Canada to Canadians and then sell the jobs on the international market for envelopes of cash under the table, pretending they couldn't find Canadian workers. Or they use those lines as a way to get family and friends over. If they own their own business, they are responsible for hiring. So the government's not cracking down on this at all. Number 6 is the rising crime in Canada. There's this crazy amount of car thefts going on right now. It's not as safe as it once was. People are breaking the law. The homeless are desperate to try to find food and are acting out. Drugs are on the rise. It's really not a good situation. So I'm going to be leaving Canada and moving to Japan within a week. And I just wanted to give this as a heads up for anyone considering their options in Canada and anyone considering coming to Canada. This is some of the problems you're going to be faced with.